Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Lisa Orr. I am a product manager at Airship. I've been at Airship for over 5 years, started out as a data scientist, built some interesting algorithms like predicted to churn, and now moving into a position where I help define what our product is. We've made a big effort on moving into the journey space, and love to share some insights that I've had from all the customers using it. So I'm going to jump over to my presentation and go from there. So onboarding is no joke. You really do need to do it and do it well. Some fun stats to consider. 77% of daily active users drop off within the first 3 days after installing an app. 50% increase over the last 5 years in the cost of acquiring a customer, and 15% improvement in customer retention for brands who improve the customer experience in week 1. So drop-off is real. It's expensive to have gotten them there in the first place, and you have a real chance of retaining them if you message them well. This is the product I was alluding to, Airship Journeys. This came to life in November, and we've been adding to it ever since. And this is a great way for you to build out that welcome series where you get valuable messaging in front of your customers as quick as possible so that you prevent that massive drop-off. This is a representation of what I'm seeing with my customers. This is in blue, we have the count of welcome series by vertical. So welcome series are popular across all verticals. Retail uses them the most, but an interesting pattern here is count of messages. So retail and entertainment and media use way more messages when they have an onboarding experience versus, say, food and drink. They do have welcome series, but they're going to have fewer messages in their welcome series. So I'd love to hear from you guys as how that tracks for you and the verticals you represent. So what messages are brands sending? There's 4 key things that you're motivating your users to do. Deepen their app usage right from the start. Drive awareness and adoption of features that are important in the brand. Improve targeting and personalization. So you're asking them to tell you a little bit more about themselves so you can be more targeted. And then another important element is acquiring cross-channel opt-ins. So not just having them on one channel. If you can spread that out, there's different ways you can message them. So here's some real-life examples. For a feature tool, sign into your brand account to view your wish list, save searches, order status, and more. For cross-channel acquisition, and these are ones I definitely get 15% off your next purchase when you sign up for our weekly email promotions. There's that carrot of 15% off to get them to provide a really important channel for you. And then targeting and personalization. Tell us your favorite teams and we'll keep you posted on games. So these are 3 real-life examples, first one anonymized, that we've seen great reaction to by their audience bases. And then another question you might ask is, how many messages should I send? You should at least send 1 message and welcome them in. Majority of our customers are sending 2 messages for their onboarding messaging, which was a surprise to me. I was expecting it to be at least 3, but majority is 2. We see a blip at 6, which is quite a few messages. There is definitely a diminishing return the more messages you tack onto a message series, but I have seen them go all the way up to 10. When should they be sent? Sorry, that's a typo, should be when should they be sent? What I've seen is your very first message goes immediately between 1 to 4 hours from when the person joins your brand, and then your second message 1 to 3 days later. That's the range that we've experienced. And then your third message, if you're going to have 3, we've seen that go from 3 to 7 days. So you'll have a welcome series as short as just a few days and as long as 10 days. And then here's a quick dive into some anonymized data. What we have here is 2 examples of journeys and just the data flow across the messages. So this is a really quick view. What I've cut off is the actual messages themselves, so you don't know who's actually sending these. But on this first one, it says utility and productivity. We have a 3-message journey, and the numbers, what they represent on the very left, the 82,000, that's how many users have come into the app. And they've had this first seen, so they've first opened the app. So they now qualify for this message, for these messages. And then that next number to it, 77,000, this represents how many users are eligible for that first message. And then 22% is how many direct engagements in ratio have you seen for that 77,000 user base. And then to the right, we have the statistics for the second message. And on the bottom, we have food and drink vertical brand with the 2-message journey, and we see a different pattern of data there. So to dive into it, what does this data tell you? Not only is it about how many messages, what should you send, and how frequently, the question is, did I do it right? And this layer of data gives you a quick diagnosis of where you might be getting it wrong. So I want to point out these two numbers. We have the 77,000 on the left, and we have the 6,000 on the right. That's how many users were eligible for each of these messages, message 1 and message 2. On the left, that number is very high. There wasn't very much drop off from the first scene to that first message, but between messages, there is a massive drop off. Now that could be due to people opting out, so they can't receive message 2, or uninstalling, and therefore they can't receive any more message from you ever. Now you can quickly dive in and figure out what that pattern is, what that drop-off really relates to. But either way, there's an opportunity for you to optimize this message series by changing the content of message 1. If you are driving uninstalls, you may need to immediately adjust your first message. But another concept is maybe you're not targeting them soon enough after the first message. So for this series, the time delay between 1 and 2 was 5 days. We would recommend experimenting with shortening that to maybe 1 day and seeing how that performs. So that drop-off is an important signal to take action on. And on the bottom here, we have the numbers to the left of the red circles are a consistent, people are staying in the brand and they're receiving the second message. So that's good, that's stabilized. But we're seeing a massive drop-off in direct engagements. And so that can be cause for concern. And what we'd recommend there is updating the content of message 2 to hopefully drive that engagement back up. So here's my last slide, and then I'd love to open this up to conversation. Hopefully some of these ideas are turning in your mind, and love to hear your feedback. But a really important thing is not just, it doesn't end after onboarding. You need to consider what happens afterwards. So 78% of customers or consumers say they would be more loyal to a brand that understood them and what they are looking for. And that's really easy to do with our automation software, where you have your first messages baked together in an onboarding journey. And they can't be too personalized because you don't know very much about your new users. They just started with you. But as you get to know them, as they send you more data, do more behaviors, you can now take them on a bespoke route of acquisition, retention, all these lifecycle, well, I guess you've passed acquisition, but you know, when you want to grow them into a more loyal customer. So in this example on the right, we have a really easy way in Airship to connect journeys together with behaviors. So from here, if somebody does do the rewards sign up, they immediately flow into our use rewards journey. And if they don't, you take them into a re-engagement journey. So you're taking these signals and you're taking action on them. So that is the content of these slides. And now I'd really love to open it up to discussion. And these are just some prompts for you. Number one, have you built an automated message series? We actually had a poll on this, and a lot of people in this program have. So that's really great. I'd love to hear about them. And then what impact have you seen from onboarding messaging? And what works and what not works, what doesn't work, and have you iterated? So great. I'd love to have some people jump on and tell me about their different experiences with Welcome Series. And I have one person in the queue, Jonathan Doing. And if anybody wants to join the queue, please do so. I'd love to have a live conversation. But besides that, we did have a really good question from Cal. So Cal said, would love to hear your experience tips on aligning in-app onboarding experience with mobile messaging and email. Do they complement one another or are they totally separate? So I think that what I've seen customers do is totally separate them. And it has to do with the software they're on and how that forces them to separate it. And when they think about their data revolution where they can tie those people together, where they have enough information about the user and they know the different channels that they're on and can connect that as to one profile, then you open up the opportunity to make this cross-channel onboarding real. A really good concept I've seen some customers execute is you start off with an app push, and as long as they are engaging with that app push, that's great. Then just keep going in that direction. If not, then you got your in-app messaging becomes a really important side play, as well as a message center. If you can acquire them in email, then we've seen engagement rates in email that are, when it's targeted and you have a consistent messaging between those two concepts, then you can really drive engagement there too. So that's a really good question. Cal, do you have any thoughts on how this is working for you? And yeah, if there's anybody who'd like to join the conversation, I am very open to that. Hi, Amber.
Hi, I'm here for moral support. Hi, everybody. Sorry it's so loud in my house. We have other folks who can jump in and can get involved in discussion. We'd love to see if we can make this sort of virtual conversation happen. But yeah, it involves being not shy about whatever behind you looks like. So I'm trying to be not shy for you.
So I'm going to try. Amber, do you want to add Cal? I think I've had trouble adding people.
Let me see if I can do that.
Oh, hi.
I'm Cal.
Thank you.
That was actually pretty easy. There's a button at the top that says something like ask to join, ask to share audio and video. But thank you for answering the question. That was super helpful. And I think one of the things that we've run into with our app is when someone comes in, their app onboarding experience happens so much more immediately than something like email. We're firing a welcome email message right away, but then it's like our email onboarding days and gives us more of an opportunity to really educate users. But also what we found is our product team is controlling the app onboarding experience. The marketing team is controlling email and push. And we have a hard time even coming up with concise messaging between our teams.
Yeah, we've heard that so much. And also the process is so different between those two teams where you're speaking sort of different languages. And then the amount of time it takes to build an email is much longer than your in-app messaging or your push. So the time to ready is totally different too.
Right.
Yeah, I think those hurdles are really hard. We've seen what I've seen some customers think about and are starting to do now is they own the app channel. They don't own the email channel, but now Airship provides email for them to play with, so they try it out. And then they have created their own integration of an email into their onboarding or into other lifecycle journeys, and then that becomes seamless, right? So it's like they're adopting email, not trying to own it.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question here. What are the key sources, channels one should consider when building an onboarding program? And what tactic or mechanism might you consider low-hanging fruit that many companies tend to ignore when it comes to onboarding? Cal, if you have any thoughts. We also have Jenny and Ramsey from Airship, if you guys have thoughts.
Yeah, Cal, anything you wanted to add on that? Or I mean, I'll jump in, Lisa. You know, one quick thought that I like to talk to our customers about is it's not just the first 7 days welcome series. What are you going to say to them after that, right? How are you going to keep your consumers coming back into the app in a lot of cases, or engaging with your brand? So use that first 7 days to understand their behavior, and then split them into different cohorts or personas, and then start talking to them differently. When I look at customer data and I see really high engagement rates in an app on the first day, dive down in engagement rates after the first 14 days, I know that that customer hasn't spoken to them in a way that spoken to the consumer in a way that brought them back into the app over that first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to the channels, I mean, talk to your customers where they want to be spoken to, right? Like if you have users who are primarily engaging with you on email and you see that in the data, or you have users that are primarily engaging with you via the app and you see that in the data, you should respect that. That's something that, you know, either implicit preferences, which are things like that, where you have engagement data, or explicit preferences, where you have people who say, hey, don't send me these emails anymore. That gives you a lot of context and how to interact with those users. So another thing that's really important with an onboarding program is trying to establish that, you know, those sense of boundaries, right? Like where does this customer fall in line as far as like messaging? Do they care if I send them 5 pushes in a day? Do they get upset if I send them a push a week? That it's a per user thing. And I think when it comes to the lowest hanging fruit, the biggest thing is the data. Like I work with a lot of customers where, you know, getting to their data is, you know, at least from our side, from the channel side, it's super easy. But then taking that and incorporating it into all of the other things they're trying to do is where it gets complicated. But the lowest hanging fruit is just understanding, if I send this and somebody clicks on it, what does that mean? If I send this and they open the app, what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? You know, how do I balance that with my overall like company goals and things that I'm driving towards?
100%. And I think another thing is don't assume that your end customer has the same level of familiarity with your product as you do, right? So yeah, onboarding is also education. It's not just, hey, welcome, come buy some stuff, right? like this blush is wonderful, come back and see us. You know, it's here's what our app is, here's where everything is, here's how you get around, here's how you navigate. You know, we have some grocery customers who are now having a ton of app users who've never used an app, right? And they're on and they're ordering online and they're doing curbside pickup and delivery. And there's a huge education component there that I think can be missed pretty easily if you don't take the time, like you're saying, Sam, to think it out before you start.
Cal, what is your current onboarding that you guys are doing?
So our original email onboarding, at least, was very much focused on feature education to try to get at some of that feature adoption, and to try to help tell a story about what our app can really do to help users. But because of coronavirus, we sort of scrapped some of that and went back to basics of like, here's it in its simplest form, stripped away some of the more promotional messaging to at least help users. So I suppose taking a step back, I work for a company called Gas Buddy. And so users would come to us to find cheap gas prices. We've got a couple of other things that happen within our app. We've got an affiliate marketplace where if you make a purchase through one of our affiliate partners, you earn what we call gas back. It's essentially a percentage of your purchase in free gas. We felt that was one, not the most appropriate message during coronavirus times, and 2, because no one was shopping. We're not affiliated with Amazon. So a lot of the places where people were going, we didn't have as part of our program. So we scaled back a lot. We're looking to redo all of that. We just kind of relaunched some brand voice messaging that we're looking to reincorporate. And so trying to take notes on some of these things like driving awareness and feature adoption is definitely still going to be the focus for us. But I love the idea of improving targeting and personalization and getting people to build out their profiles so that we can kind of get at a little bit more cross-channel personalization. So not just email, but also, you know, what else can we put, push notifications, stuff like that.
Time of the world feels like ripe time for experimentation. Is that something that you guys are really leaning into?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been doing, I suppose I would call it a weekly series that we call gas price news. And so in the beginning of coronavirus stuff, things were a little bit crazy with gas prices where they were literally plummeting. There was a point when the price of oil was actually negative because there was so much surplus that it had nowhere to go. So we were doing a lot of content as opposed to promotional messaging, giving people tips and tricks for how to fill up safely, how to take advantage of some of the low prices, what some of the predictions we had were for how low or for how long we thought gas prices would be as low as they were. So we sort of changed our strategy there. And so we stripped back tons of our promotional messaging to actually try to help our users a little bit more.
I know Jenny and Ramsey both help customers a bunch. What kind of experiments in this day and age have you been seeing?
A lot. I think you hit the nail on the head. Right now is a time where people are willing to try things that potentially wouldn't have tried before, because when everything is just normal, it's very easy to just keep doing what you're doing. But as of right now, you've got to kind of think outside of the box and in the home, because so we're seeing a lot of again, through Journeys, we're seeing a lot of people try and dive into like cross-channel orchestration and getting into how do we use our channels most effectively. And again, kind of go back to what I said earlier, is your users will have an affinity, they'll have a preference, and it's usually the channel they're engaging with you on the most. And so trying to use that information effectively is something that we're talking with a lot of our customers through. And then I think one thing that came up actually in a conversation we had earlier, I think is really important to this as well, is you've got to have at least some kind of direction for onboarding. It can't just be everything. I think that there's a tendency where you have if you have 10 teams in your company, each of those 10 teams wants 3 things in the onboarding series. And so kind of picking and choosing the things that are going to be most important to the majority of customers, and then getting into more segmentation and targeting those customers who are more likely to engage with those particular features is a much better way to go, rather than just trying to just shotgun blast everything that your company can do to a new customer. It's the same kind of thing as if you were hanging out with a new friend. It's like, hey, look at all the tricks I can do. I can ride a bike and I can ski. It's like, cool, calm down, man. Let's just have a conversation.
That's really interesting. And it's actually something that I would say our original onboarding experience was. We were literally throwing the kitchen sink at our users of here is 20 different ways that you can use our app, paired it back to try to find the most important ones. But one of the things that we've been tossing around is we don't want to not talk about those features at all. So when is the right time to introduce it? We've been calling it later boarding. So it's if your onboarding experience is 5 or 10 days after you join, that ends when we call you new. Excuse me. And from there, you would kind of flow into what we're calling later boarding. And based on the actions you've taken or things that you haven't done, we would start to surface some of the additional things in our app.
I think later boarding might be my favorite new term. We're going to quote you on that. That's A+. Fantastic. Yeah, I think one other interesting thing I've been seeing is that, let's say we have somebody who's doing push messaging today, but they haven't fully explored all the rest of the in-app options that we have, right? Because you've got push notification, but you have in-app messages, message center. What else can you play with and tweak there? With message center, doing things like incrementing the badge number and giving that little bit of badge anxiety. And, if you're like me and you want to clear out all those numbers and you can't have them there, people go in and open up the app. But I think that's been interesting. And then also folks exploring adding new channels for when things get back to normal, like an app customer who's wanting to add mobile wallet, and then using both of those things in tandem. So a couple of interesting things that have come across my desk, so to speak.
So we've got a couple other questions in here. Sam and Willie, feel free to join the actual conversation if you'd like to, but I'll read out Sam's question. In your experiences, what are the best ways to assess the efficacy of onboarding programs apart from surveys? I know Ramsey's going to have thoughts here too. I think there's a lot of profiling that you can do implicitly by their engagement. If they're interacting with your messaging, you can tag them and then use that as a concept of how engaging is my onboarding program, who is making it all the way through, what do they look like? Are they unique snowflakes that I'm never going to replicate, or is there a real pattern in there? And then I think those basic numbers of, are people engaging with this first message? Do they make it past that first one? Where is the uninstall happening? And diagnosing it in pieces is really helpful.
Yeah, it's data. I mean, you hit on qualitative data with surveys, but quantitative data, getting to the point where you can say we ran this onboarding series with 5,000 people, and of those 5,000 people, this was the engagement, this is the downstream impact that drove. One of the biggest things with an onboarding series, as with any type of messaging communication you're doing to your users, there has to be an outcome. Everything has to be focused on the outcome. What are you trying to do? If it's education, that's great, but education should lead to utilization. Education should lead to feature adoption. And so once you're in that onboarding series, making sure that you can trace that to those outcomes is incredibly important. And then, to Lisa's point, just making sure that you're building as people kind of fall into those groups and those cohorts, that you're building those out so that you can see if that's repeatable over time as well.
We've got another question. We have a few minutes left of this. So from Willie, is there general methodology to consider a user to be done with onboarding? I feel sometimes I get told about features, et cetera, and then the service provider just leaves you. That's a real thing, right? Where, to Cal's point, if you try everything and you put it all in a week or 2 weeks, you kind of run out of steam. But you gotta think long term, and we try to do that with journeys where you can connect the dots and link journeys together with behaviors. But you really need to identify what those behaviors are. If you get them to this stage, what does that mean? And what's the next thing? What's the next stage you want to get to? So mapping it all out, building the messaging in between, diagnosing where people are falling out is really critical.
And I would say that, onboarding is one piece of it. You have to have some sort of nurture campaign associated with that as well, where you're keeping your users informed about new features or updates to features that they've used in the past. Maybe they tried a feature that you have, they hated it the first time, and then they come back and they absolutely love it. There are apps that I tried something once and did not like it, and then I came back to the app later, tried a feature after they'd updated it, and it became part of my daily routine. So I think that that's a big piece of it, is making sure that you can get back to your users with changes and updates that you're making, even if you missed the first time.
It cut us off really aggressively in this program. So I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much for the questions, Cal, Sam, and Willie. Really appreciate it. You can obviously find us in the Slack channel. And also thank you, Jenny and Ramsey, for joining in. I did feel quite lonely all alone in the speaker box. So, and thank you, Cal, for actually joining and showing your face. I really appreciate it. Any other stories from Gas Buddy about experiences during COVID?
No, we are starting to figure out what happens now that people are kind of hitting the road again, and how we kind of develop campaigns around that. How long do we feel we message things around coronavirus related stuff? At some point, I think the stuff that we've been saying might get a little bit tired, especially as gas prices start to kind of normalize or whatever might happen there. But it's certainly interesting. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I know my dad lives down south, and his activity has been taking a drive, right? Like this has been his big thing that he does, like on a recurring basis, because it's like you can still get out. So he just drives around.
Some research, I think, that cars.com had done, maybe, that the Sunday drive was returning. So the old thing that probably was happening when our parents were kids, where the family would jump in the car on Sunday and go for a drive, is back. So we try to take advantage of that where we can, but it's funny.
Yeah, 100%.
The old wagon. Get out the old wagon and go around. Throw the kids in the back. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.